Company, come on! This is first platoon! We've lost the square! We can't hold it!
Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. I'm Lord Pog and you have found your way to Lord Pog Gaming. So when I first started this channel, I wanted to do more than just delve into video games. I wanted to delve into all facet of gaming, whether it be video games, TTRPGs, which is tabletop role-playing games if you don't know, and just board games in general. So today I'm going to talk a little bit, and when I say a little bit I mean however long it takes because I don't use scripts. I was going to talk about the lore behind one of, if not the most important character ever in the Warhammer 40K universe. That being the God King, the Emperor of Man. And I think that's his name. I don't think I actually know his name, but he is the God King of Man in the Imperium in the 40K universe. I'm going to just briefly touch on his lore a little bit, but what I really want to talk about is more of the inspiration behind him. See, the Imperium is a funny story. I mean, it's not really funny, it's pretty tragic and brutal, and it's real dark, but it's kind of a funny story when you really think about the inspiration behind this whole setup in the 40K universe. See, I can't be for sure if they took direct inspiration from it or if this was more of an inception. But either way, if you stick with me here, I will take you to my line of thinking, and then you can make your own decision on whether or not I'm onto something here or not. See, in the 40K universe, humankind spreads out from the home planet, which the home planet in the 40K universe is called Terra. Terra, I honestly believe is Earth, but I could be wrong. I'm not the biggest aficionado when it comes to 40K. If any of you who are listening to this have a better idea or know, for sure let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure Terra is just really Earth. And when we learned how to use the warp, we began doing that and colonizing, the galaxy, basically. And then the warp becomes corrupted, and mankind gets cut off from one another. Meaning for a very long time, we cannot communicate with one another, and humans just end up colonizing these different planets, completely cut off from one another. The God Emperor is around for this catastrophe, and during this time, he rises up to power. He creates what would eventually become the first Space Marines. Basically unites all of Terra under his banner. He becomes the savior, if you will, of Terra. And then he figures out how to control the warp. They figure out how to get in contact with everyone, and they begin conquering the colonized planets. Now, like I said, this is like, if I'm not mistaken, this is like thousands of years apart from each other. So the God Emperor, the God King, he is already considerably old by this point in time. And he's still just, he's like Moses leading the armies at 80 years old, the armies of Israel at 80 years old, you know? Like, it's an unfathomable age to think that this man could live to be this age and still lead armies the way that he does, but he does. And like I said, these colonized planets had been cut off and created their own civilizations, their own customs, their own kinds of people, and he just starts coming in and saying, nope, that's mine, nope, that's mine, nope, that's mine, you belong to Terra, you belong to Terra. And he unites the entire human race under his banner once more, rising to almost darn near the status of godhood. Things seem pretty good for the Imperium at this point, the Imperium man. And then a little thing called the Horus Heresy takes place, where basically the God King's children, and I'm calling him the God King, and if I'm saying the wrong name, I am so sorry. But that's just, for whatever reason, that just sounds right in my head. The God King, he had these children, these specific ones that he loved most. And Horus and some of the others get corrupted by the warp, because the Chaos Warp has what is basically called Chaos Demons who manifest within the warp. And when you're in the warp, it's to my understanding, when you're in the warp, you have to be careful, because it's way easy to be corrupted in it. The warp is kind of a crazy place. It's hard to navigate. It allows you to shoot vast distances across space in short amounts of time, but you're taking a huge chance of bad things happening. You can hallucinate, mutations can happen. Like I said, there's demons, there's like demon gods that exist in the warp. Slanesh is a good example of one. I've heard that name a few times, Slanesh. And these beloved sons of the God Emperor of Man become corrupt. And what the Horus Heresy is what it's called takes place, where basically they try to overthrow the God Emperor's whole, like, they pretty much try to take it all over, right? They try to usurp the throne, and a showdown takes place. And Horus is no joke. He kills other important people at that time. They beam up into his ship, and Horus kills everybody but the God Emperor of Man. But they are so close to being evenly matched that the God Emperor of Man is actually wounded, gravely wounded. And he manages to defeat Horus, though. He beats him, but it darn near kills him. So much so that they take him and they put him in this chamber, and he sits on this throne, and he becomes a lich, basically. Which, if you don't know what a lich is, it's basically an undead sorcerer, you know? And that's not unlike what happens to the God Emperor of Man. He basically becomes this undead sorcerer where he looks gnarly. He's sitting on this throne. He's got all these, like, gadgets and blood pumping into him to keep him alive. But in all reality, his body is dead. It's just his will that continues to exist. And through his will, he's still able to influence the Imperium, even after his physical self is gone. His will is able to still influence things. He's able to still help guide ships through the warp and things like that. There's talk of, from time to time, kind of like a prophet, his will like imbue itself into one of his followers, and they'll speak like a prophet, telling the will of the God Emperor and things like that. So his will still exists, and there is a prophecy that says he will return one day. And there's a few ideas of how he'll return. One of them is that it'll be like the Star Child. He'll just manifest himself within the warp, and it will create a new body for him, and his will take that body for good, because it'll be strong enough to withstand it. And he will gather all the children he's fathered throughout the ages before he became a lich, basically. And together with him and his children, he will unite the Imperium once more and bring mankind into a second golden age. But as it stands right now, unless I'm mistaken, he still is just sitting on his throne waiting for his time to resurrect. This is a very interesting story to me, and I'm going to tell you, like I said at the beginning, whether or not this is actually direct inspiration, or if it's just kind of like an inception of a sort. It could be like a subconscious thing. Just from listening and watching this story, and you know, there's a lot of detail there that I've left out. A few names and places and dates and things like that I have left out because I'm not a huge scholar of war. Excuse me. I'm not a huge scholar of Warhammer 40K. There are better channels suited for that. One of the good channels that I've studied is the Vaults of Terra, for instance. That's a pretty good channel. I think it's a dead channel, but they've left their catalog up, and they've got a lot of videos, a lot of detailed videos going into like real in-depth aspects of the lore. But I'm sure there's other channels that are keeping up with some of the newer stuff that is popping up as Warhammer 40K, you know, pushes on into the newer ages and things like that. So that's not entirely important for the purpose of this video, though. What's important is to understand why the Emperor of Man, the God Emperor, because at this point he's like a god, right? Think about this. He has died and he is waiting for his resurrection, but until then, or he's waiting for his return. Technically, he's already resurrected because his will exists and it influences mankind. He's waiting for his resurrection. He's waiting for his return to lead all of mankind into like a new golden age. Up until then, mankind was shattered. Like I said, they were at war with each other. Planets had been cut off because of the warp and the chaos that took place there. It really looked like mankind would not survive as a one people. And yet, here comes this man, and he unites everybody under his banner. He is a savior, a true savior, as far as Warhammer 40K goes. And now he's worshipped as a god, and his will governs all. He exists in a plane beyond our own. And at times, he can influence others into exacting his will, even through his own words, like prophets. Before I start talking about this, let me tell you, I'm not here to preach at you. I'm not trying to sway your opinion one way or the other and this and that. That's not the purpose. I'm just talking about the idea that there is an aspect of the human psyche that wants to believe in a higher purpose. We all want a higher purpose. And the God Emperor represents that in the 40K universe. And whether these gentlemen, these people who created the original Warhammer, whether they meant to do this or not, subconsciously they still enacted that subconscious, that psyche that influenced this story, because people do want to believe. Arthur Schopenhauer was a famous psychiatrist of his day. He wasn't famous for his time. He was grossly underutilized for his time, underappreciated. But if not for him, we wouldn't have gentlemen like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Jordan B. Peterson, some of the greatest minds of our time, if not for this man, Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer, and stick with me here, I will bring it back to what I'm talking about, but I want you to think about this and take this in. Arthur Schopenhauer realized that there has to be this thing that exists in people, and he called it the will to live. Now, the will, we'll call it the will for all intents and purposes, but this will is neither good nor evil. It doesn't hate, it doesn't love. It just has a will to live. It wants to exist, it wants to survive, and it exists in each of us. In order for it to maintain our bodies, it has to consume. Take food. Take nourishment, for instance, whether that be food or water or whatever. Money, clothes, we need shelter, we need clothing, we need transportation. We need all these things in order to survive. That is the will to live. It doesn't necessarily want these things out of a sense of malice or love either. It wants these things simply just so we can exist. The problem with the will to live is it is a glutton. There's an old saying that nature abhors a vacuum. And what that means is, if you go outside right now and you dig a 3-foot hole, and leave it alone for a couple of months, don't touch it, and come back outside, it'll be filled. Maybe not all the way, but it will have started to fill itself. Nature in general will fill it through one means or another, because nature abhors a vacuum. It doesn't like empty spaces. And that will to live that Arthur Schopenhauer believed that existed in us is a vacuum. And it is in our nature to try and fill it. So we live as gluttons trying to fill that. Now, that is a very psychological and technical way of looking at that. There are those that believe religiously, whether it be Judaism or Christianity or Islam, even philosophies like Buddhism, believe in a similar aspect. And through Christianity, because I'm the most familiar with it, so I will use that as my primary example. But again, I'm not trying to preach at you. I'm just trying to get to my point. Through Christianity, people will call that the God hole. See, in Genesis, in the beginning of Genesis, God creates mankind in his likeness. He says, "Come, let us make man in our image." To be more precise, it says in Genesis 1:26, it says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and every other crawling thing that crawls on the earth." So God made mankind to exist with him, to be a part of them, because he said, let us make man in our image. Now, John 4:24 says, God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. That is a quote from Jesus. He was talking to a woman who thought that physical locale has bearing on proper worship of God. The point being here, again, is if God is spirit and he made us in his image, and according to the Bible, Jesus is the Son of God and is a part of God, then Jesus is saying God is spirit. So God didn't make us physically in his image as much as in his spirit. In other words, it's kind of like God took a piece of himself, a piece of his spirit, to make mankind with it. And then man, of course, sins in the Garden of Eden. Adam sins in the Garden of Eden. Eve sins in the Garden of Eden. And they end up getting kicked out. It says that Adam walked with God by in the cool of the day through the garden. And then when he sins, God turns them away because God cannot be of sin. So it's like we lose a part of ourselves there, which creates a hole in us. So people call it the God hole, and you try to fill it with things when you should be, according to religious people, you should be trying to fill it with the Lord. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. Like I said, this is not what the point of this is. The idea is that Arthur Schopenhauer, whether it's religious or not, there is a hole in mankind that is a will, and it is gluttonous, and it will just consume and consume and consume to try and feed itself, no matter what your vice may be. And I call it a vice because we need some of these things to live. You need interaction to create life. And I'm going to word it just like that. You need to interact with other human beings to create children, to create life. You need food to survive. You need liquid to survive. Most things don't have a negative connotation. You need money to buy things in order to survive, and yada, yada, yada. Most things don't have negative connotations until you do too much of them, until you have too much, and then you become gluttonous. So the psychology behind this, the reason why I bring this up, is because if we all share this whole, which Arthur Schopenhauer believed, then we all have that predisposition. Is that the right word? Predisposition? Boy, I sure hope so. That predisposition to psychologically know that we need a higher purpose. Yeah, and I'm not just talking about God, believing in a higher being. I'm not talking about that at all. Everybody wants a higher purpose. Everybody wants to belong to something important. And in the Warhammer 40K universe, that important thing is the God Emperor of Man. He is that higher being or higher ideal. At this point, it's an ideal that manifests itself at its own will. Now, it could be said, who's to stop somebody from saying, oh, I'm feeling the will of the God Emperor, and this is his will, and I'm his prophet, and blah, 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 and they're telling you what they want you to believe. There is room for doubt in all things. Just in any other belief, there is always room for doubt in all belief. No matter what you believe in, there is always room for doubt, because how can you truly know? There were people who existed in the time of the God Emperor, and they saw him. There is a corpse that sits on a throne that, for all intents and purposes, looks like it's alive, or at least looks like it's being maintained. He's basically on life support, right? Like, they're basically just keeping him there to keep his will alive. There's still that feeling of a need to believe in something. The Imperium of Man, the Ultramarines, the Space Marines, not even just the Ultramarines, but any Space Marine. Whether it be, I believe there's like the Blood Wolves, also the Blood Angels, I think, is another one. Or the Space Wolves and the Blood Angels, I think. You got the Ultramarines, and so on and so forth. because there's a lot of Space Marine factions, right? But the Space Marines believe in the God Emperor. And I could be wrong. Maybe not all of them do. Maybe some of them are like more heretical than others. Like I said, I don't know. So if there is, let me know about it in the comments. I'd be way interested in hearing about all that. Like all the stuff that I'm missing here. I'd be more than interested to hear about it because I love the lore behind Warhammer 40K. But anybody who plays for Warhammer 40... Anybody who plays Warhammer 40K knows how powerful the Space Marines are. They're gung-ho, they're genetically enhanced monsters, basically. And they do it under the guise of faith. They believe in something greater than themselves, and they push on to victory as a result of it. That's the whole point of what I'm talking about here. The idea that the creators of this game knew that to make the Imperium as strong of a force as it was, they had to give them some sort of strong belief system. And like I said, I don't know if they took direct inspiration from the Bible or if it was from it could be just an amalgam of religions and non-religions, philosophies and the lack thereof. Regardless, my whole purpose here isn't to rally for just one, because then we're missing the mark here. We're not making a point. We're just preaching. No, the point here that I'm making is that it is in our nature to want to be a part of something greater than us, whether it be a cause or a belief. And the God Emperor of Man embodies all those things. He doesn't just embody a higher belief, he embodies a higher cause as well. He embodies all those aspects that people inside want and need, because we have the will to live inside of ourselves. And so we will press on. And if you give us something to feed that will, and mind you, you can get zealots in all sorts of things. You can get zealots in religious causes, regular causes. I mean, it doesn't matter. You get those people who are a little too gung-ho, and they end up doing more damage than they end up doing good. I'm not saying that happens in the Warhammer 40K universe all the time. What I am saying is if they are feeding that hole inside of themselves, and I honestly believe these causes, these beliefs, this want, the Imperium of Man was going to fall until he took charge. Like a savior, if you were. A Messiah. He rose up, lived, died, lives again in this torpor, but his will continues, and he will be resurrected again. That is all a part of a belief system. Not everybody in Warhammer 40K, in the Imperium of Man, truly believe in the God Emperor, but they believe in the cause of man. So whether they believe in the God Emperor fully or not is neither here nor there, because they believe in the cause of man. Again, they have something to strive for. Whether you believe in a religious belief or just a cause, it's still a form of belief. Even believing in nothing is a type of belief, because it's still something that you think is true. And if you think it's true, then you believe it's true. It is a type of faith. Faith is the substance of things felt, not seen. And that is just human nature. I'm not here to lecture you on whether or not you should believe in a religion, or you should rally for this cause or that cause, or this religion or that religion, or don't believe in any of it, and you're just wrong. No, what I'm saying is it is in our nature as human beings to have faith in something or another. Because again, I say faith is the substance of things felt, not seen. You feel it. And it is interesting to me that even after the God Emperor basically been put into torpor and his will still extends, people can feel it. Sometimes it's used to guide the ships through the warp, the chaos warp. Sometimes it's used to influence people in their speech. Sometimes it does other things, makes things flourish. But we don't know for sure if that's really the God Emperor or not, do they? They can't be 100% sure. And in a way, it's kind of represented that way. Even in the Warhammer 40K, they say it all, they tell that story as a matter of fact, but we don't know for sure if that skeleton sitting upon that throne is true, if its will is truly enacting itself on anybody or not, or if the brain is functioning but the body is past, or the body is still there but the brain is dead, if you will. We can't be for sure of that, because there's nothing that 100% ever says that, I don't think. I haven't read all the books and all the things like that, because I know that there's probably novels and comic books and stuff where maybe in one of those you see it definitively, but at this point, just basing it upon that story and all the lore, if you study it just like a textbook, then it comes across as if there is a possibility that this God Emperor he's gone. And these people just use his memory as a way to strengthen themselves in hopes that there will be another golden age for mankind. It is very well done from the creators of the Warhammer 40K universe, because they took a very basic thing that we all share as people. All of us do. Every single one of us has a type of faith, and they took all of it. That's the thing, they took all of it. Causes, religious beliefs, whatever. They took it all and they embodied it into this one character and told a story about him and how he literally saved the entire world, then stretched his will out into the stars. Basically like hyperspace jumping around, finding these other colonies on these distant planets, uniting them under our banner as well, and then brought it all under one unified people. It's a very interesting take on how dark and grim sometimes a cause, a want to believe. It is brutal, it is bloody, and I find it 100% fascinating that the God Emperor of mankind isn't just the God Emperor of mankind. That's not really doing him any justice. He is the embodiment of our will to live. He is that whole that Arthur Schopenhauer talked of so long ago. And just for the record, Arthur Schopenhauer was a minimalist. He ate enough to live. He wore enough to clothe. His shelter, his lodging, was enough to survive in. He never fed the will to live more than it needed to survive, because he knew of its gluttoncy. And that is really what the God Emperor of Man is. He is our will. He is a representation of mankind's will to live. As far as the Marines go, the Space Marines go, he does a lot for them. They take on some pretty deadly things. If you've never seen what a Tyrannid looks like, go look that up. That is a faction in the Warhammer universe, and they are crazy. But they have that cause, that belief to rally under, and they push through, and they fight hard. They take on space demons, and they fight, and they survive. Because it's for the Imperium. It's for the God Emperor. It's for mankind. It's for their will to live. Such a fascinating take on a very psychological, deep-seated thing that we all share together. Doesn't matter who you are. Regardless of who you are, we all have that will to live because we all want to survive. While there are others in the Warhammer 40K that, there are other stories of characters in that are corrupt, and they use the whole God Emperor, the Imperium of Man, that whole religion, if you will, for corrupt reasons. Because they're a glutton. They're not just feeding it what they need, they're feeding it more. And a lot of bad things happen. I may do more videos on some of that, the outcome of that. I'm looking into it, but for now, that is my take on the story of the God Emperor of Man, his unification of the planet of Terra, and all of mankind's different civilizations out in the middle of space, or out in the different galaxies and stuff, and just his whole place within the 40K universe. He is the Imperium's will to live. He is that vacuum. And those who listen and adhere, and again, he may not really exist. That's the thing. He may be dead. But those who choose to use that, and they feed it just right, like the Marines, they accomplish great things, while others become overly corrupt as a result of it. There's parallels there that I could go into all sorts of parallels there. Horus, the God Emperor's most beloved son, turns on him and tries to usurp him, and the God Emperor ends up having to smite him. That is real reminiscent of Lucifer and God in general. There's all kinds of parallels I could draw there, but I don't really want to make this about that as much as I want to talk about the psychological nature of the story in general, and that is Arthur Schopenhauer's will to live. The God Emperor is the Warhammer 40K Imperium of Man's will to live. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you sitting here listening to me just grasp at straws. If you like what I do here, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I am so blessed by all of you who watch these videos, and I just couldn't do it without you. And even if you don't subscribe, that's okay. I just appreciate the views. I really do. I'm blessed by every view I get, every subscriber I get, every like I get. And if you have any deeper knowledge of the subject, please feel free to leave a comment. I'd be way interested in learning more about this, because I'm a pseudo scholar when it comes to Warhammer 40K knowledge, but I started drawing these parallels in my mind just listening to this story, and I've heard this story several times, but it just clicked one day, and I said, I'm picking up this vibe here, and I just wanted to share it with y'all. I appreciate you so much, and y'all come back now. Hi, Pog's Addendum here. I made a mistake and only mentioned the people who watch my videos. Once again, I apologize for this. I know there's a lot of you out there who just listen to stuff and not watch it, and I don't want to leave you out, so my apologies. For all you listeners out there, I am just as equally blessed by you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And even if you don't like, share, and subscribe, thank you for just stopping by. I am truly blessed by everyone's presence here. Y'all come back now, you hear?